Hi, I'm Doug Ramshaw, president of Minera Alamos. We're down here at the Denver Gold Forum. Minera is a gold producer and also developer of a number of gold mines in northern Mexico. And we're down here sharing the story with some of our peer group and investors at Denver. And happy to be here with Matt.
It's good to see you, Doug.
Good to see you too.
But it's been a long one. We have been on the road for some 9-10 days. Is today the last day for you?
It is, yeah.
Have you seen everyone you want to see?
Oh, and then some. And
Right.
that's actually, it's all the impromptu stuff, which, can offer surprises at these conferences. And also the impromptu sickness that comes with seeing
That's why we're sitting
so
so far
many
apart.
people. Yeah.
Doug has the lurgy,
Yeah.
but he's fighting through.
Fighting through.
Good lad. We've seen a lot of companies too, and I think this is a particularly good conference. I think it's a particularly good conference for companies like yourself, not just in terms of who you meet, but people looking into your story. Have you been on stage? Been able to tell that?
Yeah, I actually did last year I did the Beaver Creek in Denver, and I gave the same presentation at both, and I thought, that's kind of weird. Anyone who's tuning in is like, oh, it's last week's presentation. So I asked to do the fireside chat format, where I thought what was actually more important was tackling the elephant in the room, Mexican politics. And hopefully it was of more value to the technicians that were actually in the room watching, because it's when you're a smaller company here, you definitely don't get the crowds, but hopefully anyone looking at the webcast of it, regardless of Minera, it's a value to them, and I think that's something we as an industry need to be doing, right? Like, not just it's me all the time. How can you help people understand? And right now, understanding Mexican politics is pretty important.
It's critical because it's been a couple of years, right?
Yeah.
We used to see a lot of kind of silver companies coming through, the Mexican companies coming through and wanting to talk about things. They've been paralyzed because they haven't been able to raise capital because the funds just aren't there at the moment until there's some certainty around that. So, election's over.
Mm-hmm.
What does it look like going forward in country?
Well, it's played out exactly as I thought, which was investors want clarity, right? That election result meant continued murkiness. But we are about 10 days away now from AMLO ceding the presidency to Claudia Sheinbaum, and everything we're hearing on the ground, and from our peers who are also hearing it on the ground, and starting to see in terms of comments from, say, the governor of Sonora, that, permits are going to start moving again. Won't be overnight, but I think investors who have stuck with Mexico, which is an excellent jurisdiction from a cost structure, skilled labor, everything else, will get that reward as we start to see some movement again. Because whilst we had some movement in the last couple of years, certainly in election year, everything dried up. And so, it will be good to see our peers and then hopefully us in that permitting lineup.
Okay, well, let's look at the difference between companies being hopeful and the reality of what's actually happening on the ground.
Yeah.
So I think some companies, as I mentioned, paralyzed over the past couple of years, but there are others who've been able to kind of keep things moving. You're one of them. You've been slowly moving things forward across the projects that you've got. I mean, can you tell me about that?
Yeah, hope's not a good investment strategy.
No,
so, we've been advancing things like I always joke as I'm talking to you, you get this idea, I have to convert it to the US format, family fortunes. That old
in the States.
Yeah, that old game show and Family Feud over here. If you ask 100 mining people where you'd most want to build a mine in Mexico, big open pit, needs a lot of space, I think the top answer on the board, northern Zacatecas. So Cerro de Oro, that's in permitting, I mean, it's just in the prime location for it. Very strong local support. I'm actually happy that we spent an extra year on surface rights and got 100% support from a local ejido community there, because that's one of the things Ms. Sheinbaum has said, that she doesn't want to stand in the way of projects pass an environmental review that have strong local support. But we've got local, municipal, state level support, a very pro-mining governor from the AMLO party, Morena. And I can't wait. It should be one of those new. There'll be a lot of permit amendments at existing mines, but I think Cerro de Oro stacks up very well to be one of those first new greenfields mines, and it's such a game changer for us. But while we continue to push ahead, and we gave examples recently that these things are moving across the desk from right to left. We have to be looking at ways to add value elsewhere in the company. So really the permit news is just the cherry on top for our shareholders. So we're moving Santana forward after a tough year in 2023 where we made tough decisions, correct decisions. We scaled mining back. We found a way to reverse on the Lassonde curve. Didn't think that was possible. Get to the far peak and say, you know what, we'll reverse a little. But we protected the balance sheet, and it's allowed us to get to a point now where we're pushing mining, and that will lead to increased production forward. So,
when I talk about mining, and I talk to investors, perhaps on the retail side, my cliche, mining's tough. Everyone says that. There's small fires to put out every day, but I think of the past 2-3 years, it's all good. We're in the middle of a resort, and there's some jolly folks around. Thankfully, no leaf blowers today. Where you got to make some real tough business decisions. They won't be popular, but I don't think there were any correct decisions made over the past couple of years in the eyes of the market, because it was so tough. No response from retail investors, no response for junior miners in terms of access to capital. So maybe the timing was on your side in terms of the tough decisions that you had to make for the project. I mean, how do you view it? How do you view the past couple of years and the effect it had on your business model?
They were tough, but you're right. Everyone was in tough. Really, 2024 with the gold price move does actually create an environment where people have to assess, is there an opportunity cost here? To sticking with something, being patient. And we're very lucky with our shareholders. They're doing precisely that. And I don't think this would, probably plenty of reasons for investors to give up in 2022, 2023. This isn't the time to give up, because I think, we're positioned now to take advantage. But you're right, maybe because everything's so bad, that making a very tough decision. I mean, what we did last year as a producer, scaling back production, would be like an exploration company that's running seven rigs and having to tell the market, well, you know what, we're going to go down to 1 rig. That's just like kiss of death for exploration companies, right? And I think we got through it just because I think we've built a tremendous amount of trust with the vast majority of our shareholder base. Unfortunately, and what we've seen since the Mexican election, has been nothing but bad headlines since. There's nuance to all those headlines, but people just read them, and there's always sellers in a stock. There's been no reason for people to step up until recently. And Beaver Creek was very useful for me to be able to provide the nuance and backstory to a lot of headlines, which could make people think the sky's falling.
You're talking about open pit mining, or with the perception that it's not welcome. Is it?
Yes, it will be welcome. And even Miss Scheinbaum's platform, she had a 100-point platform, and point 87 was no granting of new mineral concessions for open pits. So to start with, if she wanted to say permits, she could have said permits. And new, not retroactive. So we've got all our mineral concessions. And that's right. The moment you apply anything retroactive, you're going to have potential breaches of USMCA and lawsuits and everything else. Just, hey, buyer beware. If you're going to pick up mineral concessions moving forward, you better be looking for something underground. But it's got conflated into something far more than it really is. There are big northern mining states that require big open pit mines for copper, lithium, gold, lead, zinc, with San Nicolas and in Zacatecas. And these are states where mining is still very, very important. Like plus 20% of GDP comes from mining. So even though mining as a percentage of Mexican GDP has been falling, it's very significant in the northern states. So yeah, it's been frustrating because it's been very hard to battle that narrative. All we can do is, and this is where it's been useful seeing as many people as I have this last 10 days, is, actually have a bit of time to explain behind the clickbaity headlines. Yeah. It's far more nuanced.
So this is going to get a little bit far-reaching. I apologize now, but I've said for the past couple of years that there are too many juniors in this space for investors. And from an investor's perspective, there's too many juniors pretty much saying the same thing. It's hard to differentiate between them. I think it's hard for all of them to be funded because the money just isn't there. And as metal price moves, it will encourage others to come and do more. So for a country like Mexico, which is reliant on the mining revenues, employment taxes, and all the other kind of derivations thereof, do you think that the Mexican government's going to want to sort of rein in the amount of companies coming in and doing land grabs, sitting there, doing nothing? Because it kind of felt like, that's what it felt like the last 3-4 years. People sitting on land banking, quite frankly. They want stuff to move forward. So I'm trying to be positive here.
Yeah.
They want things to move forward, but they want it in the right hands.
Well, it's funny because that point 87 of new mineral concessions, this harks back to something that AMLO said at the early part of his term.
Yeah.
When he was issuing also permits as well to companies like Orla, us, Silvercrest. He was saying previous administrations had given way too much of Mexico up for companies to explore and stuff. Enough. So he was saying no new mineral concessions. Again, not permits, and he was delivering permits.
That's my point.
And so I agree. Last year's mining reform that was proposed and then got challenged in terms of how it was put forward on constitutional grounds down there in Mexico, and everyone filed these amparos to protect their rights.
Yeah.
Ideologically, I had no issue with.
Yeah.
There was a very problematic. I thought it was very much more problematic for explorers, but for developers and producers, proper water usage. That's a global issue. Water management, reducing the time that you can sit on a concession from 50 years to 30 years with still the ability to expand for no problem whatsoever. So those words in her platform do hark back to what AMLO was saying. And somehow, just because there's been this lull for a few years, everyone is conflating it to no new permits for no new open pits.
It affects everyone. It does, but I think that's what my point was. I was trying to say it doesn't affect everyone equally.
No.
If anything, it brings a lot more control to Mexican government, federally and provincially. It gets people focused on the projects which are there, and if they can get over the line, they should get over the line. If they can't, then maybe someone else needs to step in, or that gets shut down.
Yeah.
But this, as an investor, I just get so frustrated with these continual news stories with people who've not done it before, who can't access capital to do what they're promising to do, and quite frankly, I think damaging mining as a brand into the long term with the government and with investors.
Yeah,
I think that's.
And that's not just a Mexico thing.
No, it's not a Mexico.
I mean, our industry, like way too many companies.
Yeah.
Way too little capital spread too thinly, and then we wonder why we never actually get anything achieved.
There you go.
And that's been a bugbear of mine for a long time.
So let's focus on you, back to you and the projects, because you're not, well, yes, there's exploration clearly, but you've got 3 clear projects there, all advancing. Do you feel that obviously with this higher precious metal environment, the money's going to be there when you need it? You're not particularly capital intensive, but you're still going to need something to move forward.
For Serra de Oro, which is this game-changing project for the company, we've got a funding package in place.
Yeah.
So I wanted to be able to demonstrate that we didn't need to raise equity to build that mine necessarily. And we get that up and running. My biggest challenge, Matt, will be, over the last 4 years, we've raised $26 million. We still, as of June 30th, got 8.6 of that. We're good stewards, very good stewards of capital, because if you spend it, there's only 2 ways you get it back. Yeah. Private placements or cash flow. Right? So with that, minimal amount of spend, I look at Cerro de Oro, which in its base case, we're permitting for this upside case. I've talked to you about it before. 80,000 ounces a year for 13 years. Let's throw that aside and just look at the base case. It's 60,000 ounces for 8 and a bit years. And life of mine 873. And in the early years, it's sub 700 ASIC. So let's just say we're going to run it at 1,000 ASIC.
Yeah.
And then let's start saying, forget the spot price gold environment, because I think we should be building mines that work in any price environment. Let's just look at it as a $2,000 gold price. For us as a company, that's 60 million US of operating cash flow and 58 million US of free cash flow. I struggle to think how we can efficiently invest that business back in, that money back into the business. I mean, it opens up a world of possibilities, obviously, for growth, both organic and external, which can be funded, but by our operations, not funded by our shareholders. And I can taste it, but I realize we've got the step of getting the permit first. And then it's a very simple build, and the analysts will be able to start looking at those forward cash flows. They'll realize that whilst this is it's a nice project, in its base case form or its upside, that kind of cash generation in a company of our size is going to present incredible torque, but also opportunity.
It's a real, again, another bug. I sound like a whining old man on a bench, which I am. But it's a real bugbear of mine that in this space, and we invest in property and technology and also industrials and so forth, but in the mining space, the amount of companies that forget we're here to make money and value in terms of like share price appreciation. Let's focus on the things that are important to drive that, and that's through confidence in the growth of the company. Cash generative business, free cash I should say, businesses are a rarity, because my big comment to a lot of the bigger companies, the $1 billion plus companies, is that they're plowing it back in the ground. I mean, maybe this is a different environment at 2,600 gold and $30 silver and $4.30 copper, but for all too long companies have forgotten to make money. It's all about operational cash and scale. So creating a $4 billion company without giving it back to the shareholders, I'm not sure there's much value in that. That happens too often.
And I think when we look at investors coming into the sector and we want these generalists to come back, and I try to tailor the Minera story to that of a generalist, because honestly they're long-term patient money. The sector right now, I was hearing some analyst was saying, I haven't come up with these numbers, but I heard that an analyst was saying that, look, at current gold prices, the free cash yield of the big miners is 10%. That's not enough to justify a generalist risking some capital. For Cerro de Oro, our free cash yield could be 50 to 80%. That's something which is going to be appealing to them. I mean, I'm a couple of years away from having the slide, but it's kind of, I want to be able to show, whilst everyone, and they always say the market rewards scale and everything else. And I hate that, because sometimes I think we do scale for the wrong reasons. I want to have a chart that shows, look, here's the free cash generation per ounce produced of the majors, and here's the free cash generation per ounce of gold produced of the intermediates, and here's Minera, because that will appeal to a generalist. Looking at a gold sector which is so cyclical, yes, make hay while the sun shines, we should be making hay all the time.
Well, if I go back to my banking days, it's like, bare minimum in private equity terms, bare minimum was 20%.
Yeah.
Right, bare minimum. Yeah. If it was anything less than that, we're not interested. I mean, obviously the big banks will fund debt, and then we'll be making anywhere near that. But as a private equity person, as a family office, that's what we're looking at. So we're looking at the development companies, the potential of those development companies to be, one, significantly de-risk and increase our belief that the company will get into cash flow and will be profitable. That's what I'm looking for. Very few of those on the ground. And we've seen a slew of economic studies being proved wrong this year. We've seen a slew of people building assets which are quite complicated and then getting it wrong this year. And we've seen people miss the targets significantly after they do get into production. It's not easy,
And each one of those stories will give pause for a generalist.
Yeah.
And so then we stick with this much smaller pool of resource specialty money, and it's not enough to sustain an industry that supposedly is going to be working its ass off to supply everything for the EV transition and and the like. So yeah, I mean those are own goals for sure for our sector. And there's always risk in the sector. It's like managing it. So that's why I thought 2023 for us was about smartly looking at it and managing risk. Could we have pushed things? Yes. If we did, is there a heightened risk associated with that? Yes. Scaling back, does that allow you to wait and when the conditions are right, go again? That was the decision we made, and I think I had a friend of mine who's a very big shareholder, almost as many shares as me. I got him by about 700,000. But he said a lot of companies like Minera, 18 months ago, beginning of 2023, would have blown up. But they would have, instead of listening to kind of the heartbeat of the project and circumstance down there, they would have listened to the bankers and the market and tried to do what they wanted rather than what the project was saying you should do. And this is, it's always you and me talking, but this is the real brains of the operation is Darren, our CEO, and he's exceptional in like that, assessing the risks, in Darren I trust.
Well, you guys have been there and done it before, so that's the bit I like.
Yeah.
It's simple, it's not capital intensive, and you've got three projects on the table which feel like they'll get over the line, get into production, and kind of hit those ounces that you're guiding.
Then the fun begins. Like really, like I absolutely, I have my 1 month and my 1 year plan, but I have my 3 and 5 year plan as well, and one informs the other and vice versa, and where it gets fun. And if it's getting fun for me, it means it's getting fun for our shareholders. We get the next mine built and that cash going, we can start looking at how we can grow this company, over the next 3 to 5 years into something really meaningful. But really at the same time, from this foundation of cash generation, that's going to be a very shareholder-friendly way of growth. This is not growing company scale by issuing paper on deal after deal after deal, as we've seen even with some of the biggest companies. I mean, Barrick, I gave a presentation in Spain in February where I look back to when I was an analyst in 1996, and over those 28 years, Barrick's market cap was up 320%, and its shares outstanding was up 381%. That's not a way of delivering share price appreciation. And in fact, during that 28-year period, their stock was off 40%. So, you don't have to be big. You have to be smart and nimble, flexible, and I think deliver metrics that are actually going to be very appealing for an investment community that tends to look at the gold sector as, hyper cyclical with the gold price. We build stuff at the wrong time, or when the markets are booming, we do crazy stuff. And we can be our own worst enemy in terms of attracting the very investors that we want in this space.
Well said. And I think hype, unfortunately, is a key word in there when people are investing and not fundamentals. So I'm not going to shake your hand.
Nope.
I don't want what you've got.
Can we do the elbow thing?
Not even.
No?
I'll send you an email.
Okay.
Appreciate your time today,
yeah,
Doug.
Thanks, Matt.
Get home safe and get well soon.
Thanks, Matt.
Cheers.
You too.